Peace. Felt compelled to come on and have a brief conversation about the dark side of the event. And I'm referring to the great conjunction that many of us on the internet have been talking about. I didn't put conjunction in the video because when you put popular terms in the video, of course the objective is you want to get more eyes on the video, but what also comes along with that is you get a lot more cockroaches and vermin and scavengers and things of that nature. So sometimes I just take the hit on the views and put an obscure title so that the people that I'm trying to reach, I reach. Subtitle to this main title of Dark Side of the Conjunction is the shadow of the conjunction. The term Star of Bethlehem has been used to refer to the great conjunction between Saturn and Jupiter. And Bethlehem also gives us the word Bethula, which means virgin. And it ties right in with the whole biblical mythology of the birth of Christ. So I find it a perfect segue as we talk about the dark side of the event to consider a very common reality in our human lives, specifically for women, for mothers, after giving birth, experiencing in different degrees postpartum depression. Okay. From where did I get this from? WebMD. Postpartum depression is linked to chemical, social, and psychological changes that happen when having a baby. And it's believed that the condition is greatly encouraged by a rapid drop in hormones after delivering the baby. All right. Many people have talked about the great significance of this conjunction based on several cycles that have converged. This is the closest that Jupiter and Saturn have been together, I believe, or the closest they've come together in a conjunction since 1623. 1623 is right around about 400 years ago. And for those who are, and we get into the muck of debate here, but if you are, let's just put it this way, if you are a quote unquote black person in America, this is a significant date as it relates to, some form of chattel slavery. We also see that This is the culmination of an 800-year cycle. As the last time the air cycle began with Aquarius, as far as Saturn and Jupiter conjuncted in Aquarius began in roughly 1226, roughly, concluding in roughly 1405 or so, and I may be off. So we got this 600 to 800 year cycle culminating. Jupiter and Saturn conjunct every 20 years, so we got a 20-year cycle culminating. Jupiter and Saturn remain in the same element for roughly 200 years. It may bounce into the next element one or two times, but it stays in predominantly one element for around 200 years. Last element was Earth, okay? It jumped into air in 81, into Libra. So we have the culmination of a roughly 200-year cycle. All these are converging. So whether a person adheres to this energetic cycle, it is significant, and it is a birth. Now, there are different levels to this, but we're just gonna stay where we're on the postpartum for right now. What happens when the baby's born, though? There's all this anticipation, there's all this buildup, there's all this excitement, and then the baby's born. For the mother, naturally there's a great shift in hormones, because the hormones are gearing up throughout the pregnancy. They're getting revved up to create the atmosphere that's conducive for the newborn or the gestating baby's survival. Prime example, many women might experience dental health issues during pregnancy, because if the baby needs more calcium, guess where it's going to be taken from? The mother. Okay, so she might have some enamel corrosion. You know, she may be more susceptible to gum disease, because vital nutrients are going to that child first. So, and these are not conscious efforts that she makes. These are on the subconscious level, which means it's also hormonal. We don't tell our hormones to act. These are chemical messengers that function on a greater intelligence. Okay? So all these things shift after birth, which can leave the mother in a great void, thus resulting in depression. And again, I liken this to what can happen with this big event that has been talked about so much, has been so greatly anticipated. Now, one way for the mother to combat the postpartum depression, and this may sound crazy, is to ingest her placenta. And I just want to look at, I like to play with the etymology. The word placenta comes from the root pala, P-E-L-A, Pella or Pella. And it means to spread out. So we're just going to use our scholastic liberty here in our imagination and say, okay, so in other words, and this placenta is what makes the cocoon for the gestating baby to survive and grow in during pregnancy. The placenta is flushed as part of the afterbirth, after the baby is born. So it means placenta, which comes from pela, which means spread out, has to be coagulated again inside of the mother. And if you go back and look at videos, I think I posted a video about numerology. All these themes seem to overlap. And you're talking about the mother suffers for the sake of the child with a 0, which is sifr in Arabic. The sifr becomes suffer. Suffer is also asfar, the yellow, or where we get the saffron, which is the finished work. So the suffering and the finished work are polarities of the same. So it's interesting that as the 0 is split, or the 0 as it becomes the 1 whole is split. To count is to cut. Okay, so this mother's essence has been spread out literally in the placenta. Okay, so she must ingest it again, and she can do this in gel caps. You can take gel caps of the placenta to reconstitute some form of equilibrium hormonally. That mundane action on the physical plane is a form of the mother doing shadow work, because the placenta has served a great purpose and then it's discarded, thrown out, but it still has more purpose to it. That mother ingesting that which has served as this transformative mechanism is a form of her doing shadow work. We've been birthed into a new era, whether we buy it or not. The stars compel, they don't impel. That's what one astrologer says. This guy, Edwin Lerner, I listen to sometimes. He always says the stars compel, they don't impel. So it's not like the energy's not gonna force itself. It is. It just is. But we are living within these frequencies. We live within them. They are us, we are them. So it's very possible that there would be an expansion Jupiter of fearful, contracted Saturn thoughts. Shadow. So this may be especially experienced with people who seem to be more aware of these energies. Because with more awareness of, that this alignment's coming and such, there can be greater expectation, which we'll come back to. So I want to look at some things that maybe we can do to prevent an uprising or a negative shadow response to this momentous and greatly anticipated time in the human collective. One, to acknowledge the shadow. I talked about how Robert A. Johnson talked about in one of his books about one of his contemporaries, Marie Louise von Franz. They're both Jungian psychologists. He talked about her doing the ritual of taking the trash out when there was she and a roommate. The person who may have had a windfall or a week of great prosperity, it would be their job to take the trash out, to acknowledge that when there is this great momentous moment, that it has to be balanced, because if that's seen as the light, then there has to be an equal amount of darkness to accompany it. So that in essence, getting ahead of the influx of the shadow by acknowledging it up front. So I think it would behoove all of us to acknowledge the shadow, especially if you're having if you're feeling extra joyous or encouraged, to acknowledge fears that you've had, to acknowledge reservations you've had, to acknowledge areas of angst. And for me, I'm going to speak personally, I'm having to remember that Saturn is the Roman name for Chronos, which is the Greek. Now, when we put Saturn into that perspective of Chronos, we know that if you've ever worked at some place where you had to clock in, a lot of these places would use this timekeeping system called Chronos. Chronos, time. And for me, sometimes I fear not having time to actualize my full potential. And that is because, one, I have Saturn in Leo, which speaks to me being a late bloomer, always late to the party. I also speak further. Another contributor to this angst about time is that I find myself looking back at going to college with a 4-year scholarship to play football and just fucking it up, that still, although I ended up going back and finishing, but I finished at 38. That 16 years of being behind in some regards, and just looking at things from a pure mundane linear time perspective. And the other things I've done, screwing up opportunities and so forth. So you get into this stage in life, in your 40s, and you start realizing you're playing in the second half of the football game, and time becomes more of a reality. When you're younger, you know, nothing can happen fast enough. You're in a hurry, but you know you always got time though. It's a paradox. But this side of life, you start to respect time more. So what it does is, me being a person who's never been very patient, it creates even more angst. So part of my shadow thing or work for me is to let go of my desire to completely control my time. I just added keyword completely. So everything's about balance. So that does not mean I go to just being laissez-faire, you know, and just, oh, whatever, it doesn't matter, time doesn't exist. No, still be very disciplined in how I use my time, but to give myself a break when I don't achieve all I want to within that time, and to be careful about the constraints I put on my time, and the I talked about this in another video, putting pressure on myself, you know. I know that's mad simple, but also another thing for me is you know, you're gonna have my chart here in a minute, but I'm a Sagittarius rising, you know. So Sagittarius ruler is Jupiter, and I'm a true Jupiterian Sagittarian because I'm always philosophical. I'm always have all these lofty ideas. I'm always looking at the big picture, and sometimes I can be judgmental, you know. So currently the south node of the moon is in Sagittarius, and the north node is in Gemini. Now, there are two general ways to look at this. We can look at it as the south node and the north node as being two parts of one whole, or we can look at it as, from a more modern perspective, as the south node representing past habits and the north node representing a place to aim at to balance out your past tendencies. I tend to think that they both approaches can work, because with the north node being in Gemini, the word that comes up is reconsider, you know, because, you know, the Gemini is all over the place, you know, which that can be a hindrance. But let's just look at the more positive side of Gemini, of reconsider, you know, take a second look. That's helpful, because like I said, Jupiter is expansion, okay? The downside to Jupiter, which can summon the shadow, is, I want to use two words that I intimately can relate to: overestimation of your worth. Okay. And over expectation of your success. Overestimation of your worth, over expectation of your success. Let me tell you a little story. The last time Jupiter was in Aquarius, which Aquarius is my sun sign, I told the story another time. You know, I had a windfall. It was like I felt like I was a Midas man. You know, I'm like I had the Midas touch. I'm sorry. You know, and now mind you, I had paid my dues. You know, and I was excellent at what I did, but I got to a point, and this is where your ego can come in and really bite you. I got to a point where I started to overestimate my worth. I had people that I worked with that would come in with injuries. I never went to school for physical therapy a day in my life. I could figure out ways to help a person rehabilitate an injury, lose weight, get stronger, all in one. I had people come in who had heart disease, kidney disease, and I didn't know nothing about nutrition for a person with kidney disease. What I do, go and read. Figured out, okay, they can't have so much potassium. You got to really watch their phosphorus. Put people on these plans. They come back in 3 months after visiting the doctor. The doctor says it's unbelievable. I've made such progress, and oh God, you're like a scientist, and you know, and people just really start, you know, blowing smoke up your ass, and you start, as Bill Parcells say, you start eating your own cheese. But the key is people are with you while you up and everything's looking like. People like to be around the popular guy who looks like he's super successful. So I had moved to this place, this big place, and long story short, I got locked out. I couldn't pay the rent. So I had found another place to move to. Many of these people who I thought just loved me to death, it's not that because a lot of them paid in advance. They would pay like 3 months, 6 months. Some people paid a year in advance. I said, I'm not taking your money. I'm just saying I had to go to another location, move my gym to another location that was smaller, that was more affordable. The people, the way some of them reacted, you know, I want my money back. One person wouldn't dispute it. I woke up one morning, my account was like $4,500 negative. People had disputed through their credit card, and I realized I had overestimated my worth to those people. I had built my identity around my ego and who I thought I was, and based on their accolades. You know, they didn't give a fuck about me, you know? And I had over expectation about my success by even going to that place where I got locked out of. These are two examples of the dark side of Jupiter, of getting too caught up into the revelry. Planning how many onesies you're going to get for the baby. Planning the baby shower. Planning setting up the baby's room, but not thinking about how you're going to raise that child. Not thinking about how you're going to feed this child. Is this child going to be breastfed? You know, how can I prevent the child having colic? What are all the rudimentary things I need to think about with raising, you know, caring for this newborn baby versus all of the pageantry? See? So I think it's important to keep the practicality of Saturn in mind to balance out the zealousness of Jupiter, to prevent an uprising that we don't want. I think it's also important to remember that a key word is reconciliation, because in the mythology, the Greek mythology, it was Uranus or Uranus who was attacked by Kronos. His genitalia was cut off. Then Zeus, then Kronos, time, paranoid that the same would happen to him, he went out to try to kill Zeus, and they hid Zeus from him. That's it. And they gave him a rock because he was going to eat Zeus. They gave Kronos a rock, and he swallowed that instead so that Zeus could, could grow up, become full grown. Zeus is Jupiter. So we've got Zeus. We got Zeus as in Jupiter. We have Kronos, which is Saturn. We have Uranus. Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius. Jupiter and Saturn are in Aquarius. So it's a great time for reconciliation. How do we reconcile the rebel in us, Uranus, with the pragmatist that can maybe be stagnant and rigid, Saturn, with the dreamer, Jupiter? How do we reconcile all that? That's the challenge each of us has on a personal level, balancing these energies. When we can do this, we win. We win on an individual level. We win. And when you have winners, individual winners together, collectively, you're going to win anyway. Another thing I want to say is that we often hear people talk about, oh, the veil is thin, and da-da-da-da. Everything has a dark side. So check this out. Manifestation, regardless of what anybody says, the energy is very ripe now for manifestation. Key is, what are you manifesting? Another personal story I want to share. This shit is recent. The day before the conjunction, on the 20th, kids they are off the chain. And mind you, something interesting about all my children. All my children are mutable signs. All of them. My oldest is a Pisces. The next to the oldest is a Gemini. The next is a Pisces, and the youngest is a Sagittarius. And I think that's just a sidebar. I'll talk about that in another time. I think that's just amazing, just for my family's gene pool. It's to me, it has so much. It means so much. They were off the chain, and driving me and my wife crazy. So I was bending over to pick something up, and I said, I'm so damn frustrated. And as I'm bending over, my damn back about went out on me. Now, I started the beginning of this year going to physical therapy for my back. Now, all these we had this great stellium inside of Capricorn, which rules the bones, which would also be your spine. And it's funny that I determined, or it was brought to my attention, that the source of my problem were my glutes. They were weak, which means when all my back problems started, even in high school, it started, doing deadlifts, but it all centered around having weak glute muscles. So this year, I started out the year focusing on, foam rolling and taking a lacrosse ball and rolling on my glutes. Then my wife started having me do these glute exercises that I hate when we go to the gym, but they have been phenomenal in strengthening my back and preventing, issues. But that moment, it crept back, Now, the good news is that typically when I would throw my back out, it would take sometimes a week for it to come back around. It was sore for a day. The rest of that day, the next day, it got a little better, and then I was back to normal. I attribute that to two things. Me doing this work, leading up to this, the work leading up to this, to strengthen my glutes. 2, me having the mindset to recognize what I had done to myself. My words, I cursed my own self with my words. My words, which were connected to my emotions, which are connected to my hormones. You're talking about a domino effect, and it led to a physical reaction. That's how powerful our abilities to manifest are right now. But what it told me is to be careful what you say, even more than you ever been. Be very careful, and to be responsible. Because people are making light of this on the internet. You have some people who always look for something to say just to be an outlier. Always a skeptic, always a cynic. But these energies are real. But what I learned is, don't play around with a loaded gun. Be very mindful and be responsible with your usage. I think that about covers it. It's gonna wrap it up. Hey, as always, stay down till you get up, and when you get up, stay down. Peace.
Every bone, every muscle, every ligament is said. His legendary status, the synapses in his head. Never stop firing the word when it's read, or recited, tickle the emotions of the dead. Raise priest up, levitate the masses, ignite fire, elevate the classes. Before you Google me, put on your crown and your glasses.
Clarity, insight, cut like insights. Illumine magi, rise like kites. Traverse the Milky Way on cold winter nights. As Pluto returns, Babylon burns like a torch touching gas, leaving dust in a urn.
And from these ashes and titan clashes, a new world emerges in utopian fashion. A golden age spoken of by an old sage, whose signature is cryptic on the epoch's page. Stamped and sealed, the world to come, a path is laid. But weathered souls dance and sing in the parade, whether label indigenous or a former slave. A feast is prepared, make thy presence made.
I am that I am. Legendary. 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 Melasine, melanin, cortisol, adrenaline.